Hey guys, I'll bet you didn't know that the sustain on a guitar starts at the nut. And for those of you who did know that sustain starts at the nut, I'll bet you don't know why. Well, stay tuned because I'm going to explain how the nut factors into sustain, among other things, and the things that you need to look out for to improve sustain and to maximize the performance of the nut.
The illustration you see here is a side view of the neck, the fretboard, the first fret, the nut, and the string itself. If we zoom in close and look at the nut from a side view, you'll notice that the side of the nut facing the bridge is where the string comes into contact with the bottom of the nut slot. And then as the string passes through the nut, that bottom of the nut slot falls away from the string. And I've highlighted that area in red. This is known as the fall off. And the point where the string touches the nut at the front, at the side that faces the bridge, is called the contact patch. And the goal when making a nut is to make that contact patch as small as possible and all the way to the side of the nut that faces the bridge. This is the start of your scale length. But the smaller the contact patch, the longer the string can sustain when played. Keeping that contact patch as small as possible also provides a couple of other benefits. For example, have you ever played a guitar where the strings sounded almost like a sitar when you play the open note? That's because there is too much of the nut in contact with the string. So by reducing that contact patch, you eliminate those strange sitar-like tones. Another benefit to having a small contact patch is that the string is easier to tune. There's nothing for the string to get hung up on in the nut slot. Unfortunately, there are some disadvantages to making the contact patch as small as possible. First of all, it becomes very sharp at that face of the nut. As a result, over time, that contact patch can get larger as the string wears down the bottom of the nut slot, and that can lead to reduced sustain, and it can also make it difficult to achieve proper intonation. Another problem is when you have such a tiny contact patch is it can cause string breakage if it's too sharp. So the goal here is to make that contact patch as small as possible without making it too small. And unfortunately, that takes a little bit of experience. However, it's not really that difficult to do, and the benefits so far outweigh the disadvantages that I would encourage you to approach slotting the nut this way.
Okay, hold the phone. I know what some of you are thinking. Gee, Chris, when I press the string down to the fret, that takes the nut out of the equation. Well, no, duh. But when you play a song, how many of the notes that you play involve open strings? So you have to consider the nut as part of the sustain equation.
Now, if we look at the side of the nut that faces the bridge, we can see how the slots are cut into the nut. When we add the strings and then zoom in, we can start to see some of the features of those slots and how they relate to the strings. First of all, you'll notice there's a red curved line, which I've marked the contact patch, and I'll get to that in a second. But if you look closely, you'll notice that the depth of the slots is roughly equal to half the diameter of the string, maybe a little bit more, but definitely not less. You want it to be at least half the diameter of the string. Next, as you look closely at where the slot meets the top of the nut, you can see that that slot is ever so slightly wider than the string. By doing this, we actually reduce the contact patch when viewed from the front of the string and the nut. If the width of that nut slot were the same as the string itself, that contact patch would extend all the way to the top of the nut. And as I said before, we're trying to reduce the amount of contact between the string and the nut in order to maximize sustain and improve tone. Now, if you're worried that making the nut slot slightly wider than the string is going to cause the string to move side to side as you play, don't. It's not that big of a deal. And downward pull of the strings will prevent that from happening.
And that's how the nut plays such an important factor in determining the sustain for your guitar. Now, what I plan to do in a future episode is I'm going to take my nut files and I'm going to slot this nut. And I will show you the techniques that I use to achieve all the goals and the factors that I just explained in this video. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, I hope this video was useful and kind of opens your eyes as to how important the nut is in not only establishing the start of the scale length, but the sustain of your guitar and to some extent the tone. So, and if you did find it useful, give me a thumbs up. Be sure if you don't subscribe to click the subscribe button and then next to it, click that little bell icon so that you'll be notified by email each time I post a new guitar building video. Yeah, it's usually about twice a week. So until the next episode, take care and we'll see you soon.